Hey guys, tonight we are going to spend winter in an ice cave you dug yourself, high in the desolate, unforgiving peaks of the Alps, waiting, just waiting, for the snow to melt enough to rejoin the world, and maybe, just maybe, hear another human voice again. Picture the scene. The biting wind whips snow and foam into stinging needles against your exposed skin. The sun is a pale, indifferent disk sinking towards the horizon, and the only sounds are the shriek of the wind and the frantic thumping of your own heart. You're here because, well, let's just say civilization decided it didn't need you right now, or maybe you decided you didn't need it. Either way, you have nowhere else to go, and winter is coming with a vengeance. Your chances of just hunkering down in a snowdrift? Let's be real, you probably won't survive this without a proper plan. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know down in the comments where you're listening from tonight and what time it is there right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the deepening snow, each step a weary effort against the steepening incline. Your breath puffs out in ragged clouds, instantly freezing on the few stray whiskers you haven't bothered to shave in weeks. The air is thin, sharp, and smells of ice and ancient rock. Below, the world you left behind is a distant, blurry memory, shrouded in the gathering gloom and the relentless blizzard that's been your unwelcome companion for days. You know, speaking of harsh winters and survival, you might recall hearing about the Donner Party. Yeah, not the cheeriest thought, I know, but their story, tragically stuck in the Sierra Nevada mountains during the winter of 1846-47, really highlights the brutal finality of alpine conditions when you're unprepared. You are trying very hard not to be them. You clutch the handle of your small, beat-up shovel, its metal freezing your glove through, a stark reminder of the impossible task ahead. You need shelter, and you need it now, before the full fury of the mountain winter descends and turns you into a particularly sad ice sculpture. The idea feels borderline insane, even to you, and you've had some ideas in your time. An ice cave, not a snow cave, which is tricky enough and prone to collapse if you don't know what you're doing, but an actual cave dug into the solid ice of a glacier or a permanent ice field. It sounds like something out of a bad adventure movie, or perhaps a slightly better survival manual that skips the easy parts. But here's the grim reality. You have limited resources. Specifically, tools are almost non-existent beyond your shovel and a sturdy knife, and traditional building materials are non-existent. Snow isn't deep enough or packed enough everywhere yet for a reliable snow shelter that will last months. Wood? Ha! You're above the tree line, buddy. Nothing but rock and ice. So the logic, as twisted as it feels in your frozen brain, is that solid ice offers a degree of structural integrity and insulation that might see you through. Plus, ice is conveniently also your water source. Multitasking, gotta love it. You scan the vast, white expanse through narrowed eyes. The wind howls, making spotting anything difficult, but you're looking for a specific kind of formation. Not just any patch of ice. You need something relatively stable, perhaps a cornice or a thick old snowdrift that has turned into névé. That's partially compacted granular snow, basically ice in training, or even glacier ice itself, preferably on a slope that's not too steep, avalanche danger obviously, and has some natural windbreak. You also need it to be thick enough to dig into a decent depth without popping out the other side or having the roof collapse. It's a tall order, like asking for a warm coffee machine to appear right here, right now. Ah, a guy can dream. You shuffle sideways, squinting. There! Up ahead, near that cluster of jagged rocks, the snow seems older, harder, almost bluish in places where the light catches it just right. It looks like a substantial, permanent snowfield, compacted over multiple seasons. Maybe, just maybe, that's your spot. It's slightly protected by the rocks from the prevailing wind, and the slope seems manageable. Your heart quickens, a tiny spark of desperate hope flickering in the vast darkness of your situation. You push on towards it, the wind trying its best to knock you off balance. The snow here is different. It crunches under your boots with a solid, icy sound, not the soft whisper of fresh powder. You scrape at it with your shovel. It's hard, much harder than you expected, even for compacted snow. This isn't going to be a quick job. This is going to be a brutal, soul-crushing excavation project measured not in hours, but likely in days, maybe even longer if the weather turns even worse. You sink to your knees, ignoring the biting cold that immediately seeps through your worn-out pants. You have to start somewhere, right here, right now. The first few scoops are pathetically small, just scraping away the surface rime. It's like chipping away at concrete with a spoon. But you have to make an entrance, a place to retreat from the wind, even a small, temporary alcove, before you can even think about digging a proper living space. You swing the shovel with more force, gritting your teeth. The metal edge bites into the ice with a screech, sending up a small shower of icy fragments. You scoop them out, then swing again. And again. Your arms ache almost immediately. Your shoulders protest. Your lungs burn in the cold air. This is less like digging and more like systematic, agonizing demolition. You think about historical examples of people digging tunnels or shelters under unimaginable conditions, like the sappers in World War I, digging beneath enemy lines in frozen mud and constant danger. At least they had comrades, even if they were often miserable. You're alone, utterly and completely alone with your shovel and a mountain of ice. The wind seems to mock your efforts, swirling the ice chips back into your face. You pull your scarf tighter, wishing you had goggles. After what feels like an eternity, you've managed to create a shallow indentation, maybe a foot deep and wide enough for you to curl up in, sort of. It's nothing really, but it offers a tiny, tiny bit of respite from the direct onslaught of the wind. You hunch down inside it, shivering uncontrollably despite your physical exertion. It's getting darker now, the light fading rapidly. You can't dig effectively in the dark. You'll have to spend the night here, in this miserable, half-formed scrape in the ice. This is just the beginning. The glamorous part of survival reality shows this isn't. No dramatic music, no quick cuts to a roaring fire. Just you, freezing, and the sound of the wind. Tomorrow, the real work begins. You have to dig deep, dig carefully, and hope the ice doesn't decide to become liquid or solid in unexpected ways. It's funny, you know, how something as seemingly simple as digging a hole can become the single most important life or death task in your entire existence. Historians still argue whether the early cave dwellers chose caves for warmth or primarily for protection from predators. But your motivation is crystal clear. Survival, pure and simple, from the cold itself. You pull your knees to your chest, trying to conserve heat, and stare out at the swirling snow, knowing this is just the agonizing preamble to months of icy isolation. You should probably only get some sleep, if that's even possible in this state. Waking up feels less like gaining consciousness and more like a gradual return to shivering misery. You unfurl yourself stiffly from the pathetic fetal position you adopted last night in the shallow scrape. Every muscle protests, cold and cramped. Your breath still hangs in the air like tiny frozen ghosts. Outside, the wind hasn't let up, and the sky is still the same bruised gray. Time seems to have stopped, or maybe just slowed down to the pace of geological change. The only constant is the cold. Deep, bone-aching cold that feels like it's trying to freeze the thoughts right out of your head. Right, digging. That was the plan, the only plan. You pick up the shovel again. It feels like a block of ice attached to your hand, despite your worn gloves. The edge scrapes against the place you stopped yesterday. It's still rock hard. There's no gentle easing into this. It's just brutal, repetitive effort. Swing, scrape, scoop, swing, scrape, scoop. The sound is a grating screech on ice, an infuriatingly slow rhythm against the backdrop of the wind's howl. Each scoop brings up maybe a handful of ice chips and compacted snow. Not the satisfying shower of material you'd get digging in soil or even soft snow. It's soul-crushing work, like trying to empty a swimming pool with a teaspoon, except the swimming pool's made of ice and the spoon keeps freezing to your hand. You focus on one small area, trying to make the scrape just a little deeper, a little wider. Your arms burn. Sweat, a dangerous enemy in this environment, starts to prickle on your skin under your layers. only to feel instantly cold. You pause to catch your breath, leaning on the shovel, the frigid metal a cruel comfort against your cheek. This isn't like those time lapses you see online where someone builds an amazing snow fort in an hour. This is pure, unadulterated grind. You remember reading once about the construction of ancient Roman aqueducts, massive undertakings requiring thousands of people digging tunnels through solid rock with basic tools for miles. Compared to that, maybe this ice cave is small fry, but it sure doesn't feel like it right now. Your personal Roman aqueduct is about 3 feet long and 1 foot deep. As the hours crawl by, the hole does get marginally bigger. You manage to deepen the initial scrape enough to stand up, awkwardly hunched over, inside it. It's maybe 4 feet wide and 3 feet deep now. Not exactly spacious, but it's progress. It offers a tiny pocket of calmer air, a slight decrease in the wind's biting force. You can almost imagine it being a shelter. Almost. The removed ice accumulates in a growing pile outside the entrance, your spoil heap. You have to keep kicking it away so it doesn't pile up and block your hard-won opening. The work continues. You try to keep a rhythm, to not think about the months ahead, to just focus on the next swing of the shovel, the next handful of ice chips. Your hands ache, your back screams, your legs tremble from the effort and the constant cold. It's monotonous, painful, and terrifyingly slow. You chipped away yesterday for hours and got almost nowhere. Today feels the same, yet the space is growing. Inch by agonizing inch. You dig down, then start expanding horizontally into the snowfield. The material gets harder as you go deeper, transitioning from compacted snow to neve, then maybe towards true glacial ice. It's like hitting progressively harder rock, except it's frozen water. Lovely. You find yourself talking to the shovel, to the ice, to the wind. "Come on, you stubborn frozen stuff," you mutter, chipping away. "Just give me a little space, that's all I ask. A tiny frozen room with a view of, well, more ice." Your voice sounds raspy and thin in the vast silence, quickly snatched away by the wind. It's a lonely sound. You realize you haven't heard another voice in how long? Days? Weeks? It's hard to tell anymore. Time blurs when survival is your only clock. This cave, once you dig it, will be your entire world for a long, long time. Better make it, survivable. A light joke? What do you call a frozen dog? A pupsicle. Yeah, okay, maybe the altitude is getting to you, or the lack of calories, or the sheer soul-numbing isolation. But hey, gotta keep the spirits up, right? Even if your audience is just a pile of ice chips, you scrape diligently at the roof of your potential cave, trying to make it high enough to crouch comfortably. This ice is dense. You could probably build a surprisingly strong structure with it if you had, different tools, like a really, really powerful laser, or a friendly polar bear who owes you a favor and likes digging. Digging into ice can reveal some fascinating things. Sometimes layers of ancient snow hold trapped air bubbles from thousands of years ago, little pockets of pristine pre-industrial atmosphere. Or occasionally in glacial ice, you might find traces of ancient dust, pollen, or even surprisingly well-preserved organic matter, like a twig or a leaf that got caught in a snowdrift ages ago and slowly got buried and frozen. It's like digging through time, one painful scoop at a time. Not that you're going to find anything exciting like an ancient frozen squirrel here. Probably just more ice. The afternoon wears on, the light shifts, casting long blue shadows across the snowfield. Your hole is now deep enough that you have to haul the excavated ice up and out of the entrance. This adds another layer of exhaustion to the process. You're working in a slightly more sheltered environment, which is a relief, but also means it's getting colder inside the hole itself, cut off from the meager sunlight. Your goal for today is to create a cavity large enough to at least sit upright and maybe lie down in a curled up position without being completely exposed to the elements. It feels like a monumental task, but you chip away, driven by the primal need for shelter. You think about other historical periods when people relied heavily on ice, like in the days before refrigeration, when ice harvesting from lakes and rivers was a major industry, or when ice houses were built to store food through the summer. The sheer effort involved in getting ice out of the ground or off the water and moving it was immense, even with large teams and purpose-built tools. You've got a single, slightly bent shovel. You are a one-person ice harvesting operation. Except instead of selling it for profit, you're using it to avoid becoming a popsicle yourself. Another joke attempt. Why did the snowman get a divorce? Because he had cold feet. Okay, I'll stick to the digging. Your focus narrows to the immediate task. Chip, scoop, haul. Chip, scoop, haul. You try to remember the techniques you read about for snow caves, making the roof a dome shape for strength, compacting the walls. While this isn't soft snow, the principles of creating structural integrity apply. You need a sturdy roof that won't collapse under the weight of the ice and snow above it, or worse, melt and drip all over you. Historians still argue whether the design of early igloos was purely functional for maximizing trapped heat, or also held cultural or symbolic significance for the communities that built them. You, however, are pretty clear on the functional aspect of your current project. Get warm, don't die. As dusk approaches, you finally manage to create a space that is, charitably speaking, a tiny icy cubbyhole. It's roughly 6 feet long, maybe 3 feet wide, and just high enough that you can sit up if you don't mind your head scraping the roof. It's cramped, damp from the ice, obviously, and still terrifyingly cold, but it's a tangible step forward. It's yours. You dug this with your own aching hands. You crawl inside, pulling what meager gear you have after you, a sleeping bag that feels woefully inadequate for these temperatures, a small pot, a little stove, and your remaining depressingly small food supply. It's not a palace, not even a shed, but it's infinitely better than the exposed scrape from last night. Tomorrow you'll make it bigger, deeper, more livable. But for now, this is home. A fragile, frozen home carved out of the heart of the mountain. You lie down, curled up as tightly as possible, the cold seeping in despite the enclosure. The wind still howls outside, but its direct force is lessened here in your icy womb. Sleep, if it comes, will be cold and fitful, but at least you're not buried alive. Yet. The icy cubbyhole is, to put it mildly, not a 5-star accommodation. It's cramped, the air is instantly thick with your condensed breath, and the walls weep moisture that immediately freezes into a thin glaze. You are, quite literally, inside a freezer. The cold seeps in through the rough-hewn ice floor, up through your sleeping bag, and wraps around you like a suffocating blanket. Your body instinctively curls into a tighter ball, a desperate attempt to conserve warmth. Every breath is a tiny visible cloud, a stark reminder of the battle your body is fighting just to maintain core temperature. It's quieter in here than outside, the howling wind muffled by the ice walls, but it's replaced by the unnerving silence of absolute isolation, punctuated only by the sound of your own ragged breathing and the faint creaks and groans of the ice mountain around you. The first order of business, after the futile search for a comfortable position, is water. You brought a small, efficient camping stove and a tiny fuel canister, precious resources for melting snow or ice. Gathering some loose ice chips from the floor, you put them in your small metal pot. Firing up the stove in this confined space feels risky, but thirst is already a problem, and dehydration is a fast track to hypothermia. The tiny flame flickers weakly in the frigid air. It seems almost pathetic against the immense cold. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the ice in the pot begins to melt around the edges, forming a tiny puddle of water. It takes a long time to melt enough ice for even a meager drink. Most of the heat seems to radiate away into the ice walls and the surrounding air. You hold your hands near the pot, trying to capture some of the warmth, a futile gesture. The process feels incredibly wasteful of your limited fuel. Each sip of the melted ice water is bone-chillingly cold, but necessary. You know better than to eat snow or ice directly. It lowers your core temperature and can accelerate hypothermia. It's a cruel irony, surrounded by vast amounts of frozen water, yet struggling to obtain a drinkable, non-lethal amount. It's like being lost at sea with nothing but salt water. Your sleeping bag is supposed to be rated for cold temperatures, but cold in a catalog and cold when you're actually inside an ice hole in the Alps are two very different things. The down inside feels damp. losing some of its loft. You shiver uncontrollably at first, the deep, racking shivers that are your body's last-ditch attempt to generate heat. You try pushing against the walls, hoping to compact the ice and maybe make it less permeable to cold. But it's pointless. The cold is just there. It permeates everything. You pull your knees closer to your chest, burying your face in your arms. Sleep feels impossible, a luxury your body can't afford when it's working so hard just to stay alive. The psychological weight of the situation starts to press down. The sheer crushing isolation. You are utterly alone. No one knows exactly where you are. No one is coming to find you unless you can signal them, which is a long way off. The silence is broken only by your own sounds or the wind. You start to notice little things, the way the ice catches the faint light filtering in, the condensation forming patterns, the tiny, almost imperceptible creaks of the ice. Your mind, desperate for stimulation, focuses on these details. It's a strange, intense form of solitude. You remember reading about solo explorers in the Arctic or Antarctic and the profound psychological effects of months or years of isolation, sometimes leading to what they called polar madness. You hope you don't have enough time for that. Trying to lighten the mood, you think of a joke. Why don't scientists trust atoms? Because they make up everything. Okay, not exactly a cold weather joke, but hey, it's something. Laughter feels like a foreign concept, a warm, bubbly emotion that has no place in this frozen reality. You focus instead on practicalities. Can you improve this space? Tomorrow you'll need to expand it, make it taller, wider, maybe try to create a sleeping platform elevated slightly off the floor to combat the conductive cold. Every improvement, however small, feels like a victory against the overwhelming odds. This struggle for shelter and warmth echoes through history. Think about the early inhabitants of northern regions, like the Inuit people, who mastered the art of building igloos, incredibly effective shelters constructed entirely from snow. They could create a comfortable living space inside, relatively warm compared to the outside temperature, using just snow knives and their understanding of the material. Their design was not just about survival, it was a sophisticated adaptation to their environment, allowing entire communities to thrive in harsh conditions. Your little hole is a pale imitation of that ingenuity, a desperate, last-minute attempt. Another quirky tidbit. Did you know that in certain conditions, ice can be surprisingly noisy? Glaciers creak, groan, and pop as they move and change under pressure. Sometimes in very calm, cold environments, you can even hear the faint sounds of water molecules freezing within the ice. It's like the mountain itself is whispering. Or maybe it's just whispering about how ridiculous you are for being out here. Either way, the ice feels alive, a massive, slow-moving entity that you are now attempting to burrow into. As you lie there, shivering less violently now, but still intensely cold, you reflect on the human capacity for endurance. What drives people to survive against such incredible odds? Is it pure instinct, a biological imperative? Is it hope, the belief that things will get better? Or is it something else entirely, something deeper? Historians still argue whether the primary motivation for early human migration into challenging climates was driven by necessity, like fleeing conflict or seeking resources, or by an innate exploratory drive. You're pretty sure your motivation is necessity, with a side of made a questionable life choice. You try another joke. What's an igloo? A house made of ice cycles. Nope, still not landing. The cold seems to freeze your sense of humor too. Sleep is elusive. Every time you drift off, you are jolted awake by the intense cold, a sharp biting sensation that reminds you of the constant danger of hypothermia. You shift your weight, trying to find a less cold spot, trying to insulate yourself better, but it's a losing battle. Your feet feel like blocks of ice, your fingers stiff. You wiggle them inside your gloves, trying to encourage circulation. It's going to be a long, long night. And this is just the first one in here. There will be many, many more. The thought is almost unbearable. You close your eyes, focusing on your breath, trying to slow your heart rate, trying to conserve what little energy you have. Survival is a marathon, not a sprint, and you've barely taken the first step inside this frozen tomb. Morning arrives not with a dawn chorus, but with the subtle lessening of absolute darkness and a profound, bone-deep ache. You didn't really sleep. You just existed in a state of semi-conscious shivering, your body a rigid knot of muscle trying to conserve warmth. Uncurling from your defensive ball feels like peeling yourself off an industrial freezer floor, which, let's be honest, isn't far from the truth. Every joint protests, stiff and sore. The air inside the cave is thick with the scent of stale breath and damp fabric. It's still incredibly cold, maybe even colder, now that the brief warmth from melting water last night is long gone. The first task is clear. Make this icy coffin slightly less coffin-like. You retrieve your collapsible shovel, the one that seemed like a slightly excessive piece of gear, back home but now feels like your most valuable possession after the sleeping bag. Digging out the cave is tough work. The ice is hard, crystalline, and unforgiving. Each chip of ice requires effort, sending minor vibrations up your arm and making your already cold fingers protest. You work slowly, methodically, trying to expand the space just enough to sit up comfortably and maybe, just maybe, create a slightly elevated sleeping platform. The goal of the platform is simple physics: cold sinks. If you can get your sleeping bag even a few inches off the ice floor, you reduce the direct conductive heat loss from your body into the frozen ground. It's not a perfect solution, but every little bit helps. You chip away at the sides and ceiling first, then start piling the removed ice onto one side of the floor, compacting it as much as possible with the back of the shovel. It's slow, tedious, incredibly cold work. Your breath plumbs out in thick clouds, obscuring your vision. Sweat, a dangerous paradox in this environment, beads on your forehead despite the frigid temperature, quickly chilling you if you stop moving. Resource management is instantly front and center. That tiny fuel canister for the stove, it looks significantly less full after just one round of melting water last night. You mentally calculate how many more times you can perform that vital task. Water is non-negotiable, but melting it uses precious fuel. Do you ration water intake? That's risky. Do you try to melt snow with body heat? That's incredibly inefficient and will sap your energy. Or do you accept that fuel is your most critical, non-renewable resource and guard it fiercely, using it only when absolutely necessary? The boring reality of survival isn't always dramatic hunts. It's staring at a dwindling fuel supply. You pause, leaning against the icy wall, your breath coming in ragged gasps. Your hands ache inside your gloves. This isn't an adventure movie montage set to upbeat music. It's just hard, monotonous, cold work. You try a joke to break the monotony. Why did the snowman break up with the snow woman? Because he was giving her the cold shoulder. Okay, slightly more relevant. Still not hilarious, but it elicits a small internal sigh that might have been a chuckle in a warmer life. The physical discomfort is constant. Your feet, even in insulated boots, feel perpetually cold and slightly numb. Your fingers are stiff and ache. Your back is protesting from the awkward positions required for digging. The biting cold seems to find any gap in your clothing, any weak spot. It's a relentless, insidious pressure. You remember reading about Shackleton's crew in Antarctica, huddled in their makeshift shelters for months, enduring unbelievable cold and dampness. Their ability to maintain morale and work together under such punishing conditions is a testament to human resilience, or maybe just sheer stubbornness. A slightly more obscure fact about ice: under immense pressure, like that found in glaciers or potentially in a compact ice cave, ice isn't just brittle. It can actually behave like a very slow-moving, viscous fluid. This is why glaciers flow downhill. Your cave walls aren't going to suddenly turn into a river, thank goodness. But the idea that the solid ice around you is under stress and slowly shifting is kind of unsettling, adding a layer of unease to the constant cold. You keep digging. The pile of ice shards grows. The cave is slowly, grudgingly, becoming larger. It's still incredibly basic, just a hole in the ground. But it's your hole. It feels like a small, hard-won victory. You think about the effort required by early humans to build shelters, whether using natural caves, crafting simple huts from branches and hides, or adapting to what was available. Historians still argue whether the development of complex tool use was primarily driven by the need for better hunting weapons or by the necessity of constructing effective shelter in challenging environments. Looking at your miserable little shovel in this reluctant ice, you're leaning towards shelter being a major motivator. Another joke pops into your head. What do you call a lazy kangaroo in the Arctic? Pouch potato, completely irrelevant, but the absurdity makes you crack a faint smile. Gotta keep the brain occupied, right? The silence, broken only by the scraping of the shovel and the wind outside, can become overwhelming. Your thoughts start to loop, replaying decisions, wondering about the outside world, fighting off the creeping dread of prolonged isolation. By late afternoon, you've managed to expand the cave enough to sit up straight without hitting your head and have built up a rudimentary platform of compacted ice about 8 inches high on one side. It's not luxurious, but it's an improvement. You are exhausted, cold, and hungry. You ration a small portion of your dried food. Chewing feels like a lot of effort, and the food provides surprisingly little comfort against the biting cold. Melting water takes another chunk out of your fuel supply. You watch the tiny flame with a mixture of gratitude and anxiety. As the light outside begins to fade, you retreat into your slightly larger, slightly improved ice den. You brush away loose ice chips, lay out your sleeping bag on the new platform, and prepare for the second night. You are physically uncomfortable, mentally weary, and acutely aware of how quickly your limited resources are being consumed. This is survival, a relentless cycle of discomfort, tedious work, and careful calculation, all against a backdrop of overwhelming cold and isolation. It's boring, yes, but the stakes couldn't be higher. Morning arrives, or maybe it's afternoon. It's impossible to tell with any real certainty inside this icy womb. The slight expansion of the cave yesterday feels significant, like you've upgraded from a coffin-sized hole to a slightly larger, still icy cupboard. The air is just as cold, thick with the smell of damp, compressed air. And, let's be honest, your own recycled breath. The only change is the profound, heavy silence that seems to have settled in overnight. It's not just an absence of sound, it's an active presence, pressing in from the ice walls. Your world has shrunk. It is now this small, frozen space. Outside is an abstract concept, a source of wind and more cold, but no longer a place you inhabit. The ice walls are everything. You run your hand along the rough-hewn surface. It's strangely fascinating, reflecting the dim light in crystalline facets. This is your universe now, roughly 10 square feet of carved ice. It's incredibly boring. This isolation brings a unique kind of challenge. There's no external stimulation, no birds singing, obviously, no traffic noise, no human voices, no changing scenery. Just the constant low hum of the wind outside, sometimes distant, sometimes a mournful howl right above your head, and the drip, drip, drip of melting ice if you manage to generate even a tiny bit of heat. Without external cues, time becomes meaningless. Hours stretch into eternity, and then suddenly, it feels like only minutes have passed. Your internal clock is completely broken. You try to guess the time, but it's a futile exercise. Is it Monday, Thursday? Does it even matter? The silence amplifies everything else. You become acutely aware of your own body, the thumping of your heart, the whooshing of blood in your ears, the gurgling of your digestion, or lack thereof, given the limited rations. You start talking to yourself. At first, it's just muttering practical things. Okay, gotta check the fuel. Think I'll eat half a bar now. Then it evolves. You narrate your actions. You argue with yourself. You tell bad jokes out loud to hear a human voice. Why did the Scarecrow win an award? Because he was outstanding in his field. See, peak comedy in freezing conditions. The lack of sensory input can play tricks on your mind. Psychologists call this phenomena related to sensory deprivation, and while you're certainly not in a perfectly controlled deprivation tank, the effects are similar. You might start seeing things in the patterns of the ice, or hearing faint, indistinct noises that aren't really there. It's your brain, starved for information, trying to create its own reality. This isn't hallucinating in a scary way, more like the edges of perception getting fuzzy. maybe that patch of ice does look a bit like a grumpy old man. Or was that just the cold getting to you? You have to actively fight the mental ennui. Boredom isn't just tedious, it's dangerous in survival situations. It saps morale, makes you sloppy, and can lead to despair. You try to set small goals for the day. Today's goal, try to figure out a better way to melt snow without using the stove, just in case. You gather a small amount of snow in a container and place it inside your sleeping bag near your body. It's slow, uncomfortable, and makes you damp. But after an hour, you have a few precious mouthfuls of meltwater. Success of a boring, slightly clammy kind. This constant psychological battle reminds you of explorers trapped in extreme environments, like the crew of the Endurance led by Shackleton, who spent months drifting on ice floes in the Antarctic. Keeping busy with tasks, maintaining routines, even staging plays and singing songs was crucial for their survival and sanity during periods of unimaginable waiting and uncertainty. Their ability to keep their minds engaged was as vital as finding food or shelter. A slightly quirky historical tidbit about isolation comes from the lives of hermits and ascetics in various religious traditions. These individuals deliberately sought out solitude, often in harsh environments like deserts or mountains, sometimes for years. While their goals were spiritual enlightenment rather than survival, they offer a long history of humans voluntarily choosing to live with minimal external stimuli. Their experiences, while different, show the profound psychological effects and internal focus that isolation can bring. You find yourself thinking about the outside world, not just the people you know, but mundane things. The feeling of sun on your skin, the smell of fresh coffee, the noise of a busy street, the internet. Oh, the internet. Imagine the scrolling you could do, the sheer volume of utterly useless information you took for granted. Now your information stream consists solely of, is this ice melting? And how much fuel is left? Historians still argue whether prolonged isolation fundamentally changes the human personality or merely reveals aspects already present. Are you discovering a stoic survivor within? Or is this experience simply grinding you down into a less social, more introspective version of yourself? Time will tell, assuming you have enough time. You try another joke, this one about the cold. What do you call a person who's afraid of Santa Claus? Claustrophobic. It's terrible. You actually sort of giggle at the terribleness. Gotta find humor where you can, even if it's just dark, self-deprecating, isolation-induced humor. As the featureless light outside, you assume it's day, because it's less dark, begins to fade back into absolute blackness, the cave feels smaller, the silence deeper. You consume another meager ration of food. The lack of variety is soul-crushing. It's the same bland, nutrient-dense bar every time. You melt a small amount of water with the stove, watching the precious fuel dwindle. It's a ritual now, a tiny anchor in the sea of sameness. Preparing for sleep is less about being tired and more about passing the time safely and conserving energy. You crawl into your sleeping bag on the elevated ice platform. It's a tiny bit warmer off the floor, but the cold still permeates everything. Your muscles ache from the digging. Your mind is a whirlwind of random thoughts, anxieties, and memories. The days aren't filled with dramatic escapes or daring feats. They are filled with waiting, managing resources, and fighting the psychological toll of overwhelming boredom and isolation. It's survival in its most stripped-down, tedious form. And it's starting to feel like it could go on forever. Another cycle of light outside, or lack thereof, has passed. You didn't sleep well. The cold gnaws at you through the thick sleeping bag, and your thoughts cycle endlessly between the crushing boredom and a growing prickling anxiety. It's the anxiety of the ledger, the mental spreadsheet you keep of your supplies, constantly adding up the diminishing returns, dividing the remaining portions by the unknown number of days you still need to survive. This isn't a dramatic, running from a bear kind of survival challenge. This is accountant survival. It's about percentages and projections and the terrifying rate at which those numbers shrink. You reach for your small stash of food. There were originally enough nutrient bars and energy gels for what you optimistically estimated as 2 weeks. That was days ago. Now, you count them again. running your fingers over the wrappers. 8 bars, 3 gels. That's it. Maybe enough for another week if you stretch them thin, thinner than thin, perhaps even thinner than that terrible pun you just made up in your head about a tightrope walker who was stretched thin by his job. Rationing becomes a morbid game. You break a bar into smaller pieces than yesterday. Every bite is chewed slowly, painstakingly, trying to coax every possible calorie, every molecule of sustenance from the bland, chalky stuff. The lack of variety is almost as demoralizing as the lack of quantity. You dream of flavors, salt, sugar, maybe even something crunchy, just not this same texture and non-taste. Then there's the fuel for the stove. It's a tiny canister of yawn, toHear, your lifeline for melting snow into water, and occasionally providing a brief, precious burst of warmth for your hands or to ward off the deepest chill. You pick it up. It feels lighter than yesterday, or maybe it's just your imagination, playing tricks on you again, like seeing that grumpy face in the ice. You shake it gently. It sloshes faintly. How much is left? A quarter? Less? There's no gauge, no indicator. Just a dreadful gut feeling that it's running out too fast. Water is just as critical, maybe more so. You need to melt snow constantly. It's a repetitive, energy-intensive married task. The small amount of meltwater you get from body heat inside the sleeping bag is minimal, barely enough to wet your mouth. The stove is necessary for any significant volume. This creates a terrifying dependency. Your ability to stay hydrated, to survive thirst, is directly tied to that rapidly dwindling fuel canister. You calculate again. If you use the stove just for water, maybe 2 small melts a day, how long will the fuel last? 3 days? 4? What happens after that? Melting snow with body heat will be the only option, agonizingly slow and guaranteed to leave you damp and colder. This isn't just about hunger. It's about the fundamental need for water in a bone-dry, frozen environment. The stress of this constant monitoring and calculation grinds away at you. Every meal is a reminder of what you won't have tomorrow. Every use of the stove feels like a step closer to the edge. This relentless focus on scarcity leaves little room for other thoughts. Yet the boredom of isolation is still ever present. It's a double-edged sword. The stress gives your mind something concrete to worry about besides the silence. But it's a deeply negative, draining kind of focus. Historically, managing resources in extreme environments has always been paramount. Think of the polar expeditions where meticulous rationing of pemmican, a concentrated food mixture of fat and protein, and fuel was the difference between life and death. Ernest Shackleton, again, is a famous example. His decision-making during the endurance expedition was heavily influenced by conserving every scrap of food and fuel while stranded in Antarctica. They even burned seal blubber, a harsh but necessary measure when conventional fuel ran out. A quirky tidbit about rationing comes from historical sieges. During the siege of Leningrad in World War II, civilians faced unimaginable scarcity. Rations were incredibly meager, but they developed ingenious ways to supplement them, like grinding up pine needles for vitamin C, or using wallpaper paste as a substitute for flour. People became experts in extracting minimal nutrition from whatever was available, highlighting the desperate creativity born from extreme need. Makes you wonder what kind of bizarre recipes you might invent if things get truly dire here. Snow and, well, just snow, probably. Maybe seasoned with a bit of desperation. There's an open, scholarly debate about the psychological impact of chronic, low-level scarcity versus acute, sudden deprivation. Do people who experience long-term rationing adapt better, developing more resilient coping mechanisms? Or does the constant stress and uncertainty of dwindling resources cause deeper, more insidious psychological damage than a sudden shock? It's a complex question, and right now you feel like you're getting a front-row seat to the chronic stress version. You definitely don't feel more resilient. You feel frayed. You try to distract yourself. You recount the supplies one more time, as if a different number might magically appear this time. Nope, still 8 bars, still 3 gels, still the same amount of slosh in the fuel canister. Maybe if you tap it gently. No, that doesn't help. It just confirms the depressing reality. This feeling of impending lack is profoundly unsettling. It strips away any remaining sense of security. You are entirely dependent on these finite resources, and they are vanishing. It's like watching a slow-motion train wreck where you are tied to the tracks. You tell yourself another joke just to break the monotony and the rising panic. Why don't scientists trust atoms? Because they make up everything. Okay, that one wasn't terrible. A solid B. Gotta celebrate the small victories. As the featureless light outside dims completely once more, plunging the cave into darkness broken only by your headlamp, the scarcity feels more potent. The cold seems to seep into your bones with renewed vigor, and you know using the stove for warmth isn't an option anymore. Not even for a minute. Every drop of fuel must be saved for melting water. You prepare for sleep, the act less about rest and more about minimizing energy expenditure. You curl up in the sleeping bag, trying to make yourself as small a thermal target as possible. The hunger is a dull ache, the thirst a constant dryness in your throat. But the loudest feeling is the anxiety about the numbers. How long? How much? The ice cave, which felt like a shelter, now feels like a trap. Its duration measured in bites of a bland bar and the faint slosh of liquid fuel. The survival story isn't just about enduring the cold. It's about the grinding, soul-wearing management of profound lack and the fear of the moment when there is nothing left to manage. The counting is done for now. The anxiety over the diminishing pile of resources is still a heavy blanket, but beneath it, or perhaps alongside it, is the vast, empty space of the hours. The minutes stretch into eons. You've counted the number of cracks in the ice ceiling, a surprisingly inconsistent task, as new ones seem to appear, or maybe you just missed them before. You've mapped the texture variations on the walls with your fingertips. You've even had a lengthy internal debate with yourself about whether the shape of that particular icicle looks more like a grumpy walrus or a disappointed cloud. Conclusion: definitely a grumpy walrus. This isn't just boredom, the kind you get on a long flight or a rainy Sunday. This is existential boredom. It's the kind that makes you question the fabric of reality, ponder the true meaning of watching paint dry, and wonder if your brain is slowly turning into slushy ice. There's nothing new to see, nothing new to hear, nothing new to do. The only novelties are the creeping sensations of hunger, thirst, and cold, which aren't exactly thrilling plot points in your personal survival drama. If this were a reality show, the producers would be tearing their hair out. Needs more drama, less watching the ice melt. Yeah, well, this is your reality, and it's currently sponsored by the color white and the sound of dripping water. You find yourself staring at the ice walls for long stretches. At first, it was just a passive observation, the background noise of your imprisonment. But now you start noticing the subtleties, the way the light filters through the thinner parts near the entrance, changing ever so slightly as the unseen day progresses outside. The delicate lattice of frost crystals forming on protrusions, tiny, intricate sculptures appearing seemingly from nowhere. Sometimes you hear a faint creak, a groan from the ice deep within the mountain's belly, a reminder that this isn't a static structure, but a living, albeit slow-moving entity. It's like the mountain is clearing its throat, or maybe it just has gas. Hard to tell. You trace the lines of frozen water flow on the walls, imagining the journey the water took to get here, freezing layer by layer over who knows how long. It's geology in slow motion, a testament to forces far greater than your immediate discomfort. And thinking about those forces naturally leads your mind upwards, out of this frozen bubble. You're inside a mountain, not just on a mountain, but inside it. Above you is an unimaginable weight of rock and ice, stretching miles in every direction. The sheer scale of it is mind-boggling. While you're tucked away in this small cavity, the mountain is enduring blizzards, high winds, drastic temperature swings. Avalanches might be thundering down its slopes outside. The weather you experienced on the way up, the storm that trapped you, is just one tiny, temporary event in the mountain's long, long history. It's a humbling, slightly terrifying thought. You are less than a speck of dust within this colossal structure, completely at its mercy. The vastness of the mountain outside only emphasizes the claustrophobia of your small cave. It's a strange paradox, trapped in a tiny space within something enormous. You imagine the layers above you, the permafrost, the solid rock, the snowpack. It's a world utterly indifferent to your existence. Its processes playing out on a geological timescale, while you're stuck here on a human one, counting nutrient bars and waiting for spring. Spring feels impossibly far away, a distant dream measured not in weeks, but perhaps in the melting of entire layers of the mountain itself. This feeling of being isolated within an immense silent structure brings to mind historical accounts of solitary confinement or long voyages in cramped vessels. Sailors on extended submarine missions or polar explorers spending months in dark huts experience profound sensory deprivation and isolation. Admiral Richard Byrd, during his solo stay at an Antarctic weather station in 1934, struggled significantly with isolation and psychological strain, despite being relatively well supplied. His detailed journals offer a stark look at the mental toll of being utterly alone in an extreme environment. It's a different kind of struggle than fighting off predators, but no less dangerous to survival. A quirky tidbit about mountains and ice. Glacial ice, the kind that might be making up parts of the structure around you, can contain air bubbles trapped from thousands of years ago. Scientists can analyze these tiny bubbles to learn about the Earth's ancient atmosphere. While you're toHear, potentially breathing the same recycled air, the ice around you holds secrets of breezes that blew across continents when mammoths roamed. Kind of makes your current ventilation situation feel a little less significant, or maybe just really puts the boring in boring survival. There's an open scholarly debate about the specific psychological effects of sensory deprivation versus prolonged social isolation. While you have some sensory input, cold, damp, the sight of ice, it's incredibly monotonous. Does the lack of varied stimulation contribute more to mental deterioration than the lack of social interaction? Or is it the combination that's truly debilitating? You're experiencing both, a perfect storm of nothing to do and no one to do nothing with. It's like the universe is trying to test the hypothesis in real time, with you as the unwilling subject. You try to think about anything else. Remember that time you accidentally wore 2 different colored socks to a job interview? That was awkward, but it's a fleeting distraction. Your mind drifts back to the ice patterns, the silent pressure of the mountain above, the relentless sameness. You find yourself talking to the grumpy walrus icicle again. He doesn't offer much conversation, just hangs there, looking perpetually unimpressed, probably judging your life choices. You could probably write a book about the nuances of melting snow with a tiny stove. 50 Shades of Slush. No, that's not a good idea, too cold, and definitely not PG-13. How about Zen and the art of watching water boil very slowly? Still not gripping. Maybe this is why survival stories usually involve more axes and less contemplating frost formations. The silence presses in. It's not just an absence of sound, it's a presence. A vast, heavy silence that seems to absorb any noise you make, leaving you feeling even more isolated. You hear your own breathing, the blood rushing in your ears, the faint, irregular drip of water somewhere in the cave. These small sounds are amplified in the quiet, becoming the soundtrack to your unchanging reality. As the light fades again, the internal world becomes everything. The external world, the immense mountain, the weather outside, the distance to civilization, feels remote and abstract. The only tangible reality is the cave, the cold, the dwindling supplies, and the vast, empty landscape of your own mind, where boredom and anxiety wrestle for dominance under the watchful, icy gaze of a grumpy walrus. It's a fascinating, terrible laboratory of human endurance, one that you desperately wish you could leave. The oppressive sameness of the ice cave, the vast, white silence, is occasionally punctuated by sounds from the world outside. Or are they? You strain your ears, trying to decipher the faint groans and creaks that echo through the ice and rock. Are they just the mountain settling? Or is that the distant rush of wind, different from the perpetual draft near your entrance? Is that a deep rumble from far away? Perhaps snow shifting on a distant slope? Or just your stomach complaining again? It's a constant game of acoustic guesswork, and the stakes feel incredibly high. You're listening for a signal, any signal, that this frozen holding pattern might soon break. You spend hours in this state of hypervigilance, ears pricked, breath held. The silence inside makes the faint sounds from outside seem amplified, yet they remain maddeningly ambiguous. A sharp crack might be the ice wall contracting in the cold, or maybe, just maybe, it was a branch snapping under the weight of the snow on a tree far below, a sign that the snow line is receding, a whisper of warmer temperatures. You cling to these interpretations, letting them fuel a tiny, fragile ember of hope in the cold darkness. This constant listening, this desperate search for meaning in ambiguous noise, is a well-documented psychological phenomenon in isolation. When deprived of normal sensory input, the mind becomes hypersensitive to what little is available and is prone to interpreting it through the lens of expectation or anxiety. You're basically performing Rorschach tests with your ears, seeing what you want or fear to see in the mountain's random symphony. Is that rhythmic tapping a rescue team? Probably just meltwater dripping. Is that a low whine? A snowmobile? Definitely just the wind picking up. It's like trying to find shapes in clouds, but with significantly higher personal stakes. And colder. Much, much colder. Imagining the world outside becomes a major pastime. Sometimes a solace, sometimes a torment. You picture the mountain you climbed, the jagged peaks, the vast snowfields. What does it look like now? Is the storm still raging, or has it passed, leaving behind a crisp, clear, but equally impassive landscape? You think of the valleys far below, the world of trees and streams, and, crucially, other people. You picture spring arriving there first, the snow melting, rivers swelling, the first green shoots pushing through the thawed earth. It's a vibrant, colorful contrast to your monochromatic prison. The idea of spring is your main currency of hope. Not necessarily rescue, though the thought flickers occasionally like a faulty light bulb. Rescue feels too active, too dependent on external factors you have no control over. Someone knowing you're missing, someone knowing where to look, someone having the resources to reach you. Spring, on the other hand, feels like an inevitable force of nature. The sun will get higher, the temperatures will eventually rise, the snow and ice will melt. It's a passive hope, a waiting game, which aligns perfectly with your current situation of having absolutely nothing else you can do. You're not actively surviving, you're passively enduring until the mountain decides to let you go. There's a historical precedent for this kind of passive endurance in extreme environments. The ill-fated Franklin expedition, lost in the Arctic ice in the mid-19th century while searching for the Northwest Passage, spent years trapped. While they eventually succumbed to starvation, scurvy, and hypothermia, the initial phase involved long periods of waiting for the ice to thaw, hoping to break free. Their journals describe the psychological toll of this prolonged inactivity and uncertainty, relying entirely on the slow, unpredictable thaw of the Arctic summer. You're in a different environment, but the core principle, trapped, waiting for the ice to release you, feels chillingly similar. Hopefully, your outcome will be slightly less skeletal. You think about the process of melting, the water trickling down the walls of your cave, the slow drip, drip, drip. It's annoying when you're trying to sleep, but it's also a tiny, persistent sign of the process you are waiting for. Every drop is a victory, a minute step towards freedom. It's a glacial pace, literally, but it's movement. You find yourself listening to the drips, trying to discern if they are becoming more frequent, if the flow is increasing. Another auditory Rorschach test, a quirky tidbit about sound transmission in snow and ice. Snow is actually a surprisingly good sound absorber, especially fresh powder. However, compacted snow and ice can transmit low-frequency sounds quite effectively over distance. This is why you might hear the deep thump of an avalanche far away, or the groan of shifting ice through the structure around you. But local sounds on the surface might be completely muffled. The mountain is a giant frozen filter, letting through some sounds while silencing others, making your job of interpretation even harder. It's like the mountain has its own selective hearing problem, and you're trying to get its attention. Managing hope is a delicate balance. Too much hope, too high expectations, and every silent hour, every day that passes without a clear sign of change becomes a crushing disappointment. You risk falling into despair. Too little hope, and what's the point of enduring? Why bother melting snow, rationing food, fighting the cold? Despair is its own kind of hypothermia for the mind. You have to find a middle ground, a stoic acceptance of the current reality, combined with a quiet, persistent belief that this state is temporary. It's like carrying a fragile flame in a strong wind. You have to shield it carefully. There's an open, scholarly debate about the optimal psychological strategies for long-term isolation and survival. Is it better to maintain strict discipline and routine, or to allow for periods of emotional expression and processing? Should you actively fight negative thoughts, or acknowledge them and let them pass? You're doing a bit of both, sometimes rigidly adhering to your meager schedule, sometimes letting the waves of anxiety and boredom wash over you. You haven't found a perfect answer, and frankly, you're a little annoyed you have to conduct this unscheduled psychological experiment on yourself. You try to connect with the outside world through imagination. You think about the people you know, what they might be doing. Are they looking for you? Have they given up? You push those thoughts away. They are too painful, too uncertain. Better to focus on the abstract idea of spring, of warmth, of the mountain itself relenting. It's a more reliable target for your hope, even if it feels impossibly distant. The days bleed into one another, marked only by the subtle changes in light near the entrance, the progress of your dwindling supplies, and the ongoing, silent conversation between your ears and the mountain's groans. You listen, you wait, you hope. It's a passive, frustrating existence, but it's existence nonetheless. And every faint sound from beyond the ice, every imagined glimpse of a world thawing, is a reminder that there is still something out there, waiting for you to return. Or perhaps just waiting for the ice to melt. Either way, it's something to hold on to. The sounds from the mountain are one thing, distant, ambiguous, a source of frustratingly vague hope. But the sounds inside the cave are becoming increasingly focused on one thing: the rustle of foil, the crinkle of plastic, the scraping inside a tin. Your world is contracting, not just spatially, but also nutritionally. The waiting game for spring feels less like a passive endurance test and more like a race against a clock you can vividly see ticking down with every disappearing crumb. The stash of food, once a comforting, if meager, buffer against the wilderness, is now a stark visual representation of your remaining time. You find yourself visiting the food pile more often than necessary, just to look, to count the dwindling bars, to weigh the half-empty packets in your hand. It's a morbid fascination, like checking the gas gauge in a car that you know is miles from the nearest station. But you can't help but look anyway, perhaps hoping the needle magically bounced back up while you weren't watching. Spoiler alert, it never does. That little voice in your head, the sarcastic one, pipes up. Yeah, just keep looking at it. That'll make it multiply. It's like staring at your bank account after rent. Doesn't get better, just makes you feel worse. Mabunyashingen has become a ritual, almost a religious practice. Every portion is carefully measured, debated, sometimes even mentally negotiated. Okay, can I make this last another half day? Maybe just a third of this bar now and the rest later? What's the absolute minimum I can eat today to just not die of starvation? It's a grim equation, balancing immediate hunger against future need. That initial feeling of having a little something has evaporated, replaced by the constant gnawing sensation, both in your stomach and in your mind. The simple act of eating, which was once a moment of comfort and sustenance, is now fraught with anxiety. Each mouthful is a step closer to the absolute end of your stored energy. The food itself has become less about taste and more about texture and obligation. Those energy bars? They're now just fuel pellets, ground down slowly, meticulously. The dried fruit? A precious, tiny burst of flavor that you try to make last as long as possible, like hoarding gold coins. Water, thankfully, is relatively plentiful from melting snow, but without adequate calories to burn, keeping warm is a constant, draining struggle. Your body is turning inward, burning reserves, letting you know about it with persistent chills and a dull ache that seems to permeate your bones. This psychological stress of dwindling resources and enforced rationing is incredibly taxing. It's not just the physical hunger, it's the mental pressure. Every decision about food feels critical. Did you eat too much yesterday? Should you skip a meal today? The scarcity amplifies the value of every single calorie. It's like being a medieval miser, guarding your tiny hoard of coins, except your coins are stale crackers and you're guarding them against your own biological needs. It's deeply counterintuitive and utterly exhausting. Historically, managing limited supplies under extreme conditions is a recurring theme in survival narratives. Think of the Donner Party, trapped in the Sierra Nevada mountains, resorting to unimaginable extremes as their food ran out. While your situation isn't that dire, yet fingers crossed, the psychological trajectory, the initial relief of having supplies, the slow dread as they dwindle, the increasing mental focus on food, follows a similar pattern. Their ordeal serves as a stark reminder of how quickly resource scarcity can erode not just physical health, but mental stability and even humanity. Though, again, hopefully, you won't be needing any alternative protein sources. There's a quirky tidbit about human psychology under starvation conditions. Your brain becomes incredibly fixated on food. You might dream about food constantly, imagine elaborate meals, or find yourself unable to think about anything else. This isn't just hunger, it's a deep-seated evolutionary drive taking over, directing all mental resources towards the most pressing need, finding sustenance. So if you're currently mentally composing a 12-course meal or fantasizing about a simple piece of toast, congratulations, your brain is just doing its job, albeit unhelpfully, given the circumstances. It's like your internal GPS is screaming, food, 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 when the only available destination is empty wrapper. The open scholarly debate about the rule of threes in survival, 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter in extreme conditions, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food, often raises questions about the psychological limits versus the physiological limits. While physically you might last 3 weeks or longer without food, depending on your starting condition, how long can your mind cope with the stress, anxiety, and cognitive impairment caused by severe calorie restriction and the constant threat of starvation? Does the mental breakdown precede the physical one, or are they intertwined? You're getting a front row seat to this particular debate, though you'd much prefer a comfy armchair and a documentary. Counting the days has become less abstract and more tied to the tangible evidence of depletion. Another bar gone means another day, or maybe 2 if you cut it thin, survived, but also 1 less day you can survive in the future. It's a paradox of sorts. The passing of time feels slower due to the monotony, but the food disappearing makes it feel terrifyingly fast. Every time you break off a piece of that last energy bar, it's like hitting the fast forward button on your own timeline. You find yourself becoming disproportionately attached to the packaging, the empty wrappers. They represent calories consumed, days endured. Sometimes you smooth them out, stack them neatly, a small monument to your dwindling resources. It's a strange comfort, a tangible record of time passing and survival achieved, even as it highlights the finite nature of your situation. It's like collecting participation trophies for the worst game show ever. Alpine Hunger Games one-player edition. The hope for spring, that distant whisper from Section 8, now feels even more urgent. It's no longer just a vague desire for warmth and freedom. It's a deadline. Will spring arrive before the food runs out? Will the mountain thaw before your internal furnace sputters out completely? This is the new, terrifying question that hangs in the cold air of the cave. Every faint sound you listen for is now filtered through this lens. Is that a sign of melting? Is that a sound that means the clock isn't going to stop before I hit 0? So you sit, listen, and meticulously manage the last remnants of your food. It's a quiet, desperate act, repeated daily. The taste is secondary, the pleasure non-existent. It's purely functional, a calculated delay of the inevitable. The reality of your situation isn't just cold and isolation. It's the stark, undeniable fact that you are slowly running out of the fuel you need to simply exist. And the silence in the cave, punctuated only by the sounds of you eating your last provisions, is suddenly deafening. The sounds, yes, they were there at the end of Section 9, weren't they? The sounds from the mountain, a counterpoint to the silence within and the terrible, loud silence of your dwindling food supply. Now you find yourself focusing outward again, your senses straining against the thick quiet of the cave, listening for any signal that the external world hasn't forgotten you, or perhaps, more importantly, that it's changing. The intense internal focus on calorie counting and package smoothing starts to loosen its grip just slightly, replaced by an equally intense external vigil. And slowly, subtly, the sounds are changing. The wind, which for so long was a constant howling banshee outside the entrance, is different. It's less a sustained shriek, more a series of sighs, sometimes softer, sometimes with a new wet edge to it. There are drips now, too. Not just the occasional plink of condensation on the cave roof. Those were always there, but deeper, more resonant drips that seem to come from within the ice walls themselves, like the mountain is weeping, or perhaps melting. Each drop is a tiny chime in the vast, frozen concert hall of your solitude. You become an expert interpreter of ice sounds. The sharp crack, just the cave settling probably. The low groan, maybe the glacier shifting its weight, or maybe the ice beginning to loosen its grip on the rock. The soft, slushy sound. Okay, that has to be melting snow, right? Please let it be melting snow. Your brain, desperate for good news after the bleak inventory of your food stash, latches onto these ambiguous acoustic signals and tries to weave them into a narrative of impending rescue. It's like listening to a static-filled radio broadcast and trying to decipher words. You hear what you desperately want to hear. This desperate search for external signs is a classic psychological response to isolation and uncertainty. When your internal reality is bleak, the external world becomes the primary source of potential hope. You project your desires onto the environment, looking for confirmation that things will get better, that the waiting isn't in vain. It's a powerful coping mechanism, but also a potentially dangerous one, setting you up for crushing disappointment if the sounds are just sounds without meaning. Maybe that drip is just a drip, not the first tear of springtime. Classic you, finding profound meaning in geology. The very quality of the silence inside the cave feels different too. It's no longer the heavy, dead silence of deep winter isolation. It feels lighter, expectant, perhaps because you are expectant. It's punctuated by these new mountain noises, transforming it from a void into a canvas upon which the environment is beginning to sketch new patterns. It's still mostly quiet, mind you, but it's a quiet that feels temporary, fragile, like the hush before a storm, or perhaps the stillness before a thaw. Historically, observing and interpreting subtle environmental cues has been fundamental to survival in the wilderness, particularly for indigenous peoples and early explorers. They weren't just waiting for big events. They were reading the land like a book, the behavior of animals, the type of cloud formation, the smell of the air, the specific sounds the landscape made. Take the Sami people of Scandinavia, for example, who have for centuries relied on deep knowledge of their environment to survive the Arctic winters, including listening to the snow and ice for signs of stability or impending thaw. They could likely tell you more from a single creek than you could from watching the Weather Channel. Though you suspect their methodology didn't involve sitting in a hole complaining about energy bar flavors. There's a quirky tidbit about how sensory deprivation and isolation can heighten your perception of subtle stimuli, sometimes to the point of hallucination. Your brain, starved of normal input, starts manufacturing its own. So, are those drips really getting more frequent? Or is your overstimulated auditory cortex just telling you they are? Is that soft rustle the wind changing? Or just your sleeping bag shifting, amplified by your hopeful mind? It's hard to say, isn't it? Your senses feel both incredibly sharp and potentially utterly unreliable. It's a real head-scratcher, which frankly you have too much time to engage in. The open scholarly debate about the precise triggers for the end of winter in alpine environments, is it primarily solar radiation, air temperature, specific precipitation changes, or complex interactions between them, feels less academic and more acutely personal now. You're living the effects of this complex interplay. Each drip, each softening sound of the wind, feels like a tiny data point in the mountain's vast, slow-moving calculation. You're desperate for the answer to this complex equation to be, spring is coming, preferably quickly, please and thank you. You start spending more time near the cave entrance, not just for light, but to listen. You press your ear against the icy wall, hoping to hear the underground movement of water, the subtle groan of frost melting. It's a strange posture, hunched over, ear pressed to ice, looking utterly ridiculous to any hypothetical observer, which is a comfort in itself, knowing there are none to judge your awkwardness. It's like trying to eavesdrop on a conversation between the mountain and the coming season. Whispering, "Psst, mountain, is spring like close?" The mountain replies with a non-committal drip. Well, this intense focus on the external brings back some of the earlier, more active hope that had been somewhat buried under the despair of Section 9's dwindling food supplies. The two realities are now in constant, painful contrast. Inside, depletion and quiet dread. Outside, the tantalizing promise of change, carried on the wind in the meltwater. It's like watching a race where your car is running out of fuel, but the finish line might just be getting closer. Maybe. Possibly. You find yourself rationing not just food, but attention. How much time can you afford to spend listening by the entrance versus conserving energy further inside? How much mental energy can you expend on hopeful interpretation versus necessary planning for the worst-case scenario? Every aspect of your existence here is becoming a calculation, a trade-off. It's exhausting, like playing a low-stakes game of poker against yourself, except the stakes are actually incredibly high. The sounds are your new companions. They fill the void left by the absence of human voices, the fading memory of conversation. They are the mountain's slow, deliberate articulation of its own process. You listen for the yawn sound, the unmistakable signal, perhaps a sudden rush of water, a massive ice fall, hopefully not too close, or maybe just a sustained, undeniable increase in the symphony of drips and trickles, a sound that says definitively it's happening. The thaw is real. Spring is on its way. Until then, you strain your ears. You listen to the subtle changes in the wind, the soft, insistent rhythm of the drips, the deep, resonant groans of the ice. Each sound is a word, a sentence, a paragraph in the mountain's slow, unfolding story. And you, the sole reader, are waiting, hoping, praying for the chapter that contains the words, "Help has arrived," or "The way is clear," or even just, "Hey, anyone in there?" You are waiting to hear a voice again, and you hope the mountain is now clearing its throat, preparing to announce its arrival. You were listening, yes, leaning in, straining your ears against the mountain's silent conversation with the wind and the ice. That intense focus on sound naturally starts to pull you, inch by patient inch, towards the source of those sounds, the cave entrance, the place you've mostly avoided, except for necessary light exposure, due to the biting cold and the sheer soul-crushing scale of the white emptiness outside. But now the sounds are different, and perhaps the view is too. Slowly, cautiously, you edge forward. The quality of light changes dramatically as you get closer. The soft, filtered glow of the deep cave gives way to a brighter, sharper light near the entrance. It's still mostly white, still dazzling, but as your eyes adjust, you start to see texture. The smooth, unbroken expanse of snow you remember from your final desperate push inside is no longer quite so uniform. There are patches now, darker patches, patches of bare rock. They're small at first, like ink blots on a white canvas, scattered near the entrance, exposed by the retreating snowpack. You stare at them, mesmerized. They are not white, they are gray, brown, the color of stone. Seeing rock, seeing earth, after weeks of nothing but white and ice in the gray-white of your cave walls, is surprisingly visceral. It's like rediscovering a primary color after living in grayscale. Wow, rocks. Remember those? They come in colors other than ice blue and frost white. And then there are the trickles. Fine, delicate threads of water snaking down the rock faces near the cave mouth, disappearing into the snow below. Meltwater. It's unmistakable. It's not the driven spray of a winter storm. It's the quiet, determined movement of liquid water, carving temporary channels through the snow and ice. You can see the edges of the snowpack looking soft, slushy, no longer the hard, crystalline drifts that forced you to dig. This visual evidence, confirming the auditory hints from Section 10, sparks a potent mix of exhilaration and terror. Hope surges, the thaw is real. Spring is coming. You might actually survive this. And then, the terror. What does this thaw mean? Is it safe to leave? Will the mountain become unstable? Will the meltwater flood the cave? Will rescue even be possible if the conditions are changing so rapidly? It's an emotional roller coaster driven by thermodynamics. You spend hours now perched near the entrance, just watching. Watching the patches of rock grow larger. Watching the meltwater streams multiply and deepen. Watching the snowpack visibly shrink in places, revealing more of the underlying landscape. You notice things you couldn't before. The subtle variations in rock color, the way the light hits a wet surface, the tiny dance of dust motes caught in a sunbeam entering the cave. Your world is expanding, visually, beyond the confines of your icy box. Historically, reading the visual signs of the environment was paramount for survival in extreme climates. Indigenous peoples, like the Inuit in the Arctic or the people of the high Andes, developed incredibly sophisticated knowledge of snow and ice conditions, avalanche risks, and the timing of thaws based purely on observation. The look of the snow crystals, the color of the ice, the patterns of meltwater, even the appearance of specific plants or animals. They didn't have satellite data. They had millennia of watching and surviving. Your current crash course in meltwater observation is a pale, slightly pathetic imitation of this ancient expertise. There's a quirky tidbit about snow blindness, photokeratitis, caused by prolonged exposure to UV rays reflected off snow and ice, especially intense in alpine environments. While you've mostly been sheltered in your cave, the increased light near the entrance, combined with the potentially intensifying sun as spring approaches, makes you acutely aware of the strain on your eyes. You find yourself squinting, your eyes feeling gritty and tired after even short periods near the bright opening. It's a reminder that even a hopeful sign like increasing sunlight comes with its own dangers. Your survival kit definitely didn't include sunglasses. Probably should have packed those designer shades, huh? Who knew being rescued required accessorizing? The open scholarly debate about the precise indicators that trigger the emergence of specific alpine flora and fauna after snowmelt feels particularly relevant. When do the first hardy plants sprout? When do insects become active? These are crucial signs of the season truly turning. Are the first tiny green shoots visible near those bare rock patches yet? Are there any buzzing sounds accompanying the drips? You squint, hoping to spot a brave beetle or a determined blade of grass, searching for these biological confirmations of the thaw. You're suddenly very interested in the phenology of high-altitude ecosystems. The sight of moving water is particularly compelling. It represents flow, change, movement. Everything the stagnant, frozen interior of your cave is not. You watch it carve little paths, pooling in depressions, disappearing into the snow. It's a small, persistent victory for liquid over solid. You even cup your hand to catch a few drops near the entrance. It's icy cold, of course, but it feels different from the frozen air, different from the icy walls. It feels active. This renewed connection to the external world brings back some of the earlier anxieties about rescue. If the snow is melting, will search parties be able to reach you? Or will the changing conditions make the mountain more dangerous for them? Are the same changes that offer you hope also creating new obstacles to your retrieval? It's a cruel paradox. The mountain gives with one hand, meltwater, and potentially takes with the other, avalanche risk, impassable slush. The dwindling food supply takes on a new urgency when you see the thaw progressing. Now, it's not just a matter of if you can last until spring, but listen, how much spring has to happen before you can make your move, or before someone can reach you. Every patch of bare rock, every stream of meltwater feels like a ticking clock. You find yourself doing mental calculations again, but this time integrating the external changes. If the snow melts this much per day and your food lasts this many more days, will the lines intersect before you starve? Spoiler alert, math in a freezing cave is usually depressing math. And you notice other subtle visual cues. Slowest, the way the light lingers longer in the evening, the slightly different angle of the sun at midday, the fainter stars at night, suggesting shorter periods of true darkness. These astronomical signs, slow and inevitable, add another layer to the mountain's announcement of change. They are less dramatic than meltwater, but equally undeniable. You realize that your perception of time, which had become so internal and abstract, measured in rations and sleep cycles, is starting to reconnect with the external, seasonal rhythm of the world. You're no longer just waiting. You're watching the calendar turn, written in meltwater and bare rock and the changing angle of the sun. You are witnessing the slow, magnificent process of the mountain awakening from its winter sleep, and you are desperate for it to wake up fast enough for you. You continue to watch, to listen, to hope, clinging to these visual whispers of spring. You are watching the bare rock, the meltwater streams, the changing quality of light, and you were listening. The sounds from Section 10 were subtle, the deeper bass tones of the mountain settling, the sharp cracks of ice under pressure, the whisper of the wind finding new paths around thawing snowdrifts. These were the mountain's own sounds, its slow, massive metabolism. But now, after seeing the undeniable proof of the thaw in Section 11, your listening has become more focused, more desperate. You're listening for something else, something that doesn't belong to the mountain alone. You've spent hours, perhaps days, just straining. Your ears ache from the effort. You're trying to filter out the natural symphony of the alpine world. The drips and trickles, the groans of ice, the soughing wind. You're searching for a specific frequency, a specific rhythm, a specific non-natural sound. It feels a bit like trying to find one specific grain of sand on an entire beach, blindfolded, using only your ears. Good luck with that PhD in auditory archaeology, future you. And then, through the white noise of the wind and the persistent drip, drip, drip of the meltwater, you hear it, or think you hear it, a faint, irregular sound that doesn't fit. It's distant, muffled, maybe distorted by echoes or the shape of the terrain. It's not a rockfall. It's not the wind. It's mechanical. Your heart gives a jolt, a sudden, violent beat against your ribs that sends a wave of adrenaline through your system. You freeze, muscles tense, breath held. Every other sense shuts down, focused entirely on this faint signal. You strain harder, tilting your head, trying to orient the sound. Where is it coming from? Is it getting louder? Is it fading? The initial reaction is disbelief. You've been alone for so long, dreaming of rescue, imagining sounds, playing conversations in your head. This could easily be another trick of your mind, another desperate hallucination born of isolation and hunger. Remember those vivid dreams? This could just be bleeding over into wakefulness. You mentally push back against the hope, trying to be rational. Okay, brain, calm down. It's probably just a very confused marmot with a tiny snowmobile. Totally normal. But the sound persists, faintly, intermittently. It might be an engine, a low thrum, like a distant vehicle, or maybe a helicopter. The thought sends another jolt through you, stronger this time. A helicopter search would be the most logical approach in this terrain. High altitude, capable of covering ground quickly. Historically, audible signals have been crucial in search and rescue, especially before reliable radio communication. Think about the use of bells by St. Bernard dogs, or the practice of firing distress flares, signals designed to be heard or seen over vast distances and difficult terrain. Early forms of mountain rescue relied on yodeling or shouting across valleys, using the natural acoustics of the environment. The simple human voice, projected powerfully, was often the only long-range communication available. You're now relying on the faint possibility that someone is using a modern equivalent of such a signal within earshot. You shuffle closer to the cave entrance again, trying to minimize your own sounds. The rustle of your clothing, your own breathing. The meltwater seems incredibly loud now, an annoying distraction. You cup a hand behind your ear, a primitive but sometimes effective way to focus sound. You listen intently, trying to discern any pattern, any direction. The sound seems to fade, then return. Maybe it's circling, or maybe it's just the wind carrying it in gusts. The uncertainty is agony. Is it real? Are they searching? Are they close? Are they going to find you? This is it. This is what you've been waiting for. The external confirmation that the world hasn't forgotten you. And it's just a faint, frustrating whisper in the vastness of the mountain. There's a quirky tidbit about infrasound, sound frequencies too low for humans to hear, but which can travel vast distances and are sometimes generated by natural phenomena like avalanches or even distant storms. While you're hoping to hear something firmly within the human auditory range, it makes you wonder what other signals the mountain might be sending out, unheard, or how the complex acoustics of alpine valleys might be playing tricks on the sound you think you're hearing. Could that engine noise be an echo of something much farther away? Could that faint pulsing be something entirely natural, just hitting a weird resonant frequency? The sound seems to grow slightly, just enough to confirm it's not your imagination. It is an engine, definitely mechanical. It sounds distant, frustratingly distant, like it's on the other side of a ridge or high above you or perhaps moving away. You feel a surge of panic. What if they pass by? What if they can't hear you? You have nothing to signal with, no flare, no whistle, not even a brightly colored piece of fabric to wave. Just your voice, weak from disuse and hunger, swallowed by the mountain. You open your mouth to shout, but hesitate. Will it even carry? Will it just waste precious energy? The open scholarly debate about the effectiveness of vocal calls versus other signaling methods in search and rescue, especially in complex acoustic environments like mountains, feels acutely relevant right now. Is a single weak shout better than nothing? Or is it just a drain on resources with zero chance of being heard over engine noise or wind? You decide to wait, to listen more, to see if the sound gets closer, if you can pinpoint its location more accurately. You are the epitome of analysis paralysis, brought to you by hypothermia and potential rescue. Just yell, you idiot, or don't. Ugh. Decisions are hard when you might be found by the decision. The sound fades again. Your heart sinks. Was that it? A brief moment of hope, snatched away by the indifferent mountain? You strain harder, holding your breath until your lungs ache. Silence. Just the meltwater again. Just the wind. The silence feels heavier now, more profound, highlighted by the brief interruption. You wait. Minutes crawl by like hours. Every drip of water, every rustle of your clothes sounds deafeningly loud. You are acutely aware of the silence, searching its depths for that faint mechanical hum again. And then you hear it. Again. Maybe slightly louder this time, and perhaps slightly different direction. You can't be sure. The mountain plays tricks with sound. This is it. This sound, however faint, however uncertain, changes everything. It injects a volatile mix of hope and anxiety back into your static existence. You are no longer just waiting for spring. You are waiting for them. You are listening not just for the mountain's voice, but for the voice of the outside world, calling to you across the ice and snow. And you are utterly, terrifyingly unsure if you can answer back, or if they will hear you even if you do. The listening continues, now with a desperate, sharp edge. Another cycle begins. Inside your icy cubbyhole, telling day from night is a losing battle, a distinction the mountain doesn't seem to care about. Your internal clock has gone haywire, replaced by the simple rhythm of hunger, the need to melt snow for water, and the desperate desire for sleep that never quite feels deep or restful. You wake up, or rather, you become aware, in the perpetual blue-tinged twilight of the cave. The air is heavy with the damp, cold smell of ice and your own stale breath. Every movement is stiff, a minor negotiation with the palm and the cramped space. This is it. This is the life now. The routine is brutally simple. First, melt snow for water. You scoop some clean snow from near the entrance into your small pot. You fire up the tiny stove, a precious few ounces of fuel, slowly turning ice into life-sustaining liquid. The hiss of the stove is a surprisingly loud sound in the silence, a temporary companion. You watch the ice shrink, then become slush, then finally water. It feels like alchemy, turning solid cold into drinkable warmth, a reminder of the simple physics keeping you alive. Drinking the hot water is a small comfort, a fleeting warmth in your core before the external cold reasserts its dominance. You ration it, sip by sip. Then food, your depressingly finite supply. It's mostly dried rations, bland and unsatisfying. You eat slowly, trying to make each bite last, trying to trick your body into feeling full. There are no complex flavors here, no comfort food, just calories to keep the engine running. You chew deliberately, staring at the icy wall, your mind drifting. You think about meals you've had, elaborate feasts, simple home cooking, even just a decent cup of coffee. They feel like memories from another life, a planet away. This is the new reality, sustenance reduced to its most basic, boring form. You probably won't enjoy breakfast ever again after this, even if you survive. The rest of the time is a vast, empty expanse. You can't stand up properly, so you spend hours hunched, sitting or lying down in your sleeping bag. You try to read, but the cold makes holding the book uncomfortable, and your fingers quickly go numb. Your thoughts are your primary, inescapable companions. They loop, replaying memories, worrying about the future, cataloging your discomforts. The wind outside is a constant presence, sometimes a low moan, sometimes a high-pitched shriek that sounds like the mountain itself is crying. It underscores the isolation, the vastness of the world outside your tiny, icy box. You try to keep busy. You might use a small, sharp tool to smooth the ice walls, collecting the shavings to add to your water supply. You check your gear, repack your dwindling supplies. You try to do some stretches, contorting your body in the limited space to keep your muscles from seizing up entirely. It's all just ways to mark time, to give the endless hours some semblance of structure. Without external cues, without the rise and fall of temperature or the change of light, time loses its meaning. Is it Tuesday? Thursday? Does it matter? You are simply in the now, and now that feels frozen in place. A light joke? What do you call a person who is afraid of Santa Claus? Claustrophobic. Get it? Because you're trapped in a small space, like me, alone. Haha. Cough. Yeah, maybe just stick to chipping ice. You remember reading about explorers who spent months, even years, isolated in polar regions or remote outposts. How did they cope? Journals, routines, perhaps a pet if they were lucky. Some documented severe psychological effects, including hallucinations and depression. You try to keep your mind focused, to not let the loneliness consume you. One way people historically cope with extreme isolation and monotony was through the creation of elaborate internal worlds or narratives. Some explorers kept meticulous logs, detailing every minute change in weather or personal state, turning observation itself into a form of engagement. The diaries of figures like Shackleton or Scott, while recounting dramatic external events, also offer glimpses into the psychological strain of prolonged confinement and uncertainty. Yours would probably just say, day mumble, still cold, ate dried stuff, wind blew. Yep. You find yourself talking to yourself more frequently. Not just muttering about the cold or the work, but having actual conversations. It starts with rehearsing things you'll say when you're rescued, things you'll do when you get back. Then it becomes more general, commenting on your surroundings, arguing with a hypothetical people. It's a bit alarming, but it breaks the silence. It's a defense mechanism, a way to conjure another presence. You try to keep it light, avoiding the darker thoughts. Well, Mr. Wall of Ice, you might say, patting the frozen surface. Fancy seeing you here again today. Looking a little condensation-y, aren't we? Another joke. Why don't scientists trust atoms? Because they make up everything. Right, okay, definitely losing it a bit. The lack of social interaction is a powerful force. Humans are wired for connection. Being cut off like this feels fundamentally unnatural. You yearn for a familiar face, a shared laugh, even just the sound of another human voice. That's the goal, isn't it? To survive long enough to hear a voice again, ideally one saying, "Hey, we found you." Historians still argue whether the psychological resilience of historical figures in extreme isolation was more due to inherent personality traits, rigorous training and preparation, or the cultural and societal frameworks that supported their endeavors even from afar. For you, it just feels like sheer stubbornness and a deep-seated aversion to becoming a human icicle. You occasionally scrape a small opening near the entrance to peer outside. It's always the same, a vast, featureless expanse of snow, the sky a varying shade of gray or occasionally a weak, watery blue. The wind is always there, sculpting drifts, erasing your tracks from the days you spent digging. It's beautiful in a terrifying, indifferent way. The mountains are majestic, ancient, and utterly unconcerned with your small, freezing existence inside this hole. There are no signs of life, no birds, no animals, just the wind and the snow and the overwhelming silence. This is the quirky tidbit, the profound, almost spiritual silence of extreme high altitudes and remote snowfields, broken only by natural forces. It's a silence so deep it can feel like a physical pressure. Sometimes you hear sounds that make you freeze, a distant rumble that might be an avalanche, or just the mountain settling, a creak that could be the ice expanding or contracting, or maybe just the roof of your cave deciding it's had enough. Your senses are heightened by the isolation. Every tiny noise amplified in the quiet. You listen constantly, hoping to hear something different, something that signals change. A helicopter? A snowmobile? Anything other than the wind. But it's always just the wind. The waiting is the hardest part. Waiting for spring, waiting for the snow to melt enough for travel, waiting for the possibility of rescue, waiting for the world outside to remember you exist. Every day is a victory against the cold and the hunger and the despair, but it's also just one more day in an indeterminate sentence. You think about the voice you want to hear. Not just oi voice, but the voice, the one you've been carrying in your memory, the one you promised you'd find again. That hope, fragile as it is the fuel that burns brighter than your stove. It's the reason you're chipping away at the ice, rationing your food, enduring the crushing weight of solitude. You crack another joke to the wall, quieter this time. What do you call a lazy kangaroo? Pouch potato? Okay, that one wasn't even cold related. Definitely losing it. But you have to keep going. Spring will come. Someone will find you. You will hear a voice again. You have to believe that. The relentless uniformity of Wayner inside your icy shelter begins to show tiny, almost imperceptible cracks. It's not a sudden explosion of warmth or green, obviously. This is the Alps, not a tropical paradise. It's the slow, grudging retreat of absolute cold. You notice it first in the sounds. Beyond the constant howl of the wind, there are new noises. A distinct, repetitive drip from somewhere near the entrance. A sound you haven't heard in weeks. It's the sound of ice weeping, shedding its frozen tears. Then there's a different kind of creak from the ice walls themselves. A softer groan than the brittle snaps of deeper winter, suggesting expansion, maybe even softening. These are spring's whispers, and you find yourself listening for them with an intensity you previously reserved for hoping to hear a human voice. The light filtering through the snow entrance also changes subtly. It's not just blue anymore. On rare days, there's a hint of brighter, almost golden light that hints at a sun with a bit more conviction behind it. The cold is still brutal, make no mistake. You still shiver, your breath still plumes, and the sleeping bag is still your best friend, but there's a fraction less bite to the air sometimes. A fractional, infinitesimal less bite. It's like the cold is packing its bags, but moving at the speed of continental drift. You might even notice a slightly different texture to the snow you gather for melting, Maybe a bit wetter, more granular. Tiny, tiny signals, but they feel like seismic shifts after months of sameness. This shift isn't just physical, it's deeply psychological. The focus begins to turn outward, away from the immediate, all-consuming need to simply endure another freezing day. It shifts towards hopeful waiting. You spend more time peering out the small opening, even though it's still just white and gray. You scan the vast, empty slopes with a new kind of vigilance, not just checking the weather, but searching for anything different. A dislodged rock, a patch of darker ground appearing on a sun-facing slope, a bird. Though that feels like a fantasy, you are waiting and, more importantly, listening. The routine is still largely the same. Melt snow, eat rations, try not to freeze your toes off. But the why feels different. Before, it was pure survival instinct, grim determination. Now, it's fueling the wait. You're preparing the engine for when the track clears. You might even spend a little time clearing snow from the entrance, not just for air, but in preparation for a potential exit. It's a tiny act of optimism in a world that's given you little reason for it. It feels good to do something proactive, even if it's just shoveling snow that will probably blow back tomorrow. It's certainly more exciting than talking to the wall again. What do you call a section of ice that tells jokes? A stand-up glacier? Okay, terrible, but slightly more relevant than the kangaroo. You think about historical accounts of expeditions trapped in ice or snow. Many describe this period of transition, where the long, dark period of winter gives way to the uncertain promise of spring. It was often a time of both renewed hope and heightened anxiety, as conditions could remain treacherous even as temperatures rose. The famous story of the Endurance expedition, trapped and eventually crushed in Antarctic ice, highlights this period of desperate waiting and the eventual need to abandon the ship and trek to survival. For you, it's just a tiny cave, but the psychological dynamic of waiting for conditions to change, for the ice to relent, feels universally similar. Historians still argue whether the psychological toll of long-term isolation is mitigated or exacerbated by the introduction of hope after a period of grim acceptance. Does the possibility of rescue make the current discomfort harder to bear? Or does it provide the necessary motivation to keep going? You're living that debate right now. The waiting is still incredibly boring, perhaps even more boring than the pure survival phase, because now your mind is constantly scanning, constantly hoping, constantly being disappointed when another hour passes and all you hear is the wind and the drip, drip, drip. That drip, though, it becomes a focus. You can almost map the days by its rhythm. Faster when the sun is high, even if diffused, slower as evening approaches. It's a natural clock finally after months without one. You start collecting the water from the drips in a small container, a bonus to your melted snow supply. It feels like a gift from the mountain, a tiny offering. This is the quirky tidbit, the surprising psychological comfort found in the most mundane natural sounds when you're utterly isolated, like the specific, unique sound profile of dripping meltwater in a high-altitude ice cave. It's not just water, it's a message that the world outside is slowly, slowly changing. Another joke attempt. What do you call a snowman with a six-pack? An abdominal snowman. Right, terrible. Focusing back on the drips, every now and then a bigger chunk of ice or snow might calve off the ceiling or walls with a sharp crack, making your heart leap. Is it collapsing? Is it just a thaw? Most of the time, it's just the ice adjusting, stretching its frozen limbs as the temperature fluctuates fractionally. It's a constant reminder of the unstable, temporary nature of your shelter, even as the outer world hints at stability returning. You find yourself performing rituals related to the thaw, checking the drip rate, looking for new damp patches, spending slightly longer peering outside. It's a way of engaging with the changing environment, a stark contrast to the passive endurance of deep winter. You start planning mentally. If the snow melts here, then I can try to move there. If I see exposed rock, then I know the elevation below might be clear. These plans are fragile, built on speculation and hope, but they fill the mental void left by the pure, bleak present. They are the antidote to the stagnant boredom. You remember how in the earlier, bleaker days, the concept of spring felt abstract, like something that happened on another planet or in a nature documentary. Now it feels real, imminent, just agonizingly slow. The waiting is a different kind of trial. It's no longer the active fight against death by cold and starvation. It's the passive endurance of hope deferred, of scanning an empty horizon day after day. It requires a different kind of strength, a quiet, persistent optimism that doesn't demand immediate results. It's the strength to listen for whispers when you desperately want to hear a shout. The goal remains hearing a voice. But now the path to that goal feels a little clearer, even if it's still shrouded in snow and uncertainty. The whispers of spring that aren't the voice you seek, but they are the promise that the conditions for hearing that voice are slowly, inevitably arriving. You keep listening, keep watching, keep enduring the boredom of the wait, fueled by the sound of dripping water and the faint hint of brighter light. Spring is whispering, and you are finally ready to listen. You continue the ritual of waiting, the rhythm of the drip, 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 now a constant companion, almost comforting in its predictability. The light shifts infinitesimally day by day. The cold eases by degrees you can barely measure, but the vast silence outside remains. You're so attuned to its emptiness, so accustomed to the sound of your own breathing, the rustle of your sleeping bag, the occasional groan of the ice settling. After months, the absence of human sound feels like a natural law of this mountain. You've almost given up actively listening for a voice and are simply waiting for the snow to melt enough to try to find one. Maybe you'll just talk to a sheep when you finally get down, explain your whole ordeal. Yeah, Mr. Bartholomew, it was that boring. Then it happens. It's not a sudden sound, but something that emerges from the background noise. Something different. At first you dismiss it. Wind, a rockfall, the ice settling. But it persists. A low thrumming, distant but distinct from the wind's howl. Your heart rate picks up, a physical jolt you haven't felt since the avalanche. You hold your breath, straining to isolate the sound. It grows slowly, deliberately. It's mechanical. Definitely not wind, definitely not ice. It's an engine high up. Your mind races. Helicopter? Snowmobile? Could anyone even get a snowmobile up here yet? You crawl to the entrance, peering out into the blinding white world. Still just snow, sky, and the endless slopes. But the sound is clearer now, approaching. A helicopter. The distinct whoom, whoom, whoom cuts through the mountain air like a physical presence. It feels unreal, like a hallucination after so much isolation. Is this it? Is this finally happening? You check the small opening again, frantically scanning the sky above the slope. There, a small dark shape against the white sky, growing larger. A helicopter. It's flying along the ridgeline, seemingly searching. They're looking for you. All the waiting, the enduring, the mind-numbing boredom, the talking to rocks, the questionable jokes. It's all culminated in this single moment. Panic and exhilaration flood through you. You have to make them see you. You scramble back inside the cave, grabbing the Reflectix blanket you've been using for insulation. Its shiny surface perfect for signaling. You grab a pot lid, anything that will catch the light. Back at the entrance, you poke your head out, the blanket flashing the lid, trying to make yourself visible against the vast white backdrop. The sound of the helicopter is deafening now, directly overhead. Can they see you? Are they just passing by? Doubt creeps in, cold and sharp. After all this, to be missed now. You wave more frantically, shouting, though you know your voice is swallowed by the rotor wash. You are a tiny, insignificant speck against the mountain. But maybe, just maybe, the Reflectix catches the sun. Maybe the movement is spotted against the static landscape. You flash the lid towards the sound again and again. You put your hand in the cold snow outside the cave entrance and then wave the dark, wet glove, hoping the contrast helps. Then, the helicopter banks. It turns towards your position. It's slowing down. It's descending. A rush of pure, unadulterated relief washes over you, so potent it makes your knees weak. They saw you. You are found. The boredom, the hunger, the fear, it doesn't vanish, but it recedes, suddenly relegated to a past you are about to leave behind. The helicopter hovers nearby, sending swirling snow everywhere. A door slides open and figures in bright, modern rescue gear wave. You wave back, a clumsy, emotional gesture after months of only waving at inanimate objects. They land a short distance away, and two figures jump out, trudging towards you through the deep snow. As they approach, you hear their voices, muffled by the wind and the still whirring blades, but undeniably human. The first words spoken to you in months. They are practical, direct. Are you all right? Can you walk? But to you, they are the most beautiful sounds in the world. They offer a hand, and you take it, pulling yourself out of the ice cave, out of the solitary world you've inhabited for so long. The light is blinding, the air feels different, even though it's still cold. It's freedom air. You think about the long journey, the struggle. You survived. All the planning, the rationing, the mental battles. You remember the moment you decided to dig, the quiet determination that set you on this path. Historians still argue whether the sheer stubbornness of the human will is a more potent survival tool than practical skills or physical prowess. You certainly had to rely on stubbornness. Mountain rescue operations have a long and fascinating history, evolving from local villagers helping lost shepherds to highly specialized, coordinated teams using cutting-edge technology like the helicopter that just landed. Early mountain guides often performed rescues as part of their job, facing immense risks themselves. It's a testament to human solidarity in the face of nature's power. You look back at the dark opening of the ice cave, your bizarre, frozen home. It looks smaller now, less intimidating. Just a hole in the snow that kept you alive. You reflect on the peculiar psychology of extreme isolation. One quirky tidbit is how prolonged solitude can sometimes lead to a heightened sense of connection with nature, even to the point of feeling like inanimate objects or sounds have personalities. You definitely had a few conversations with that one particularly grumpy-looking rock. It just sat there judging you. As the rescuers help you towards the helicopter, one of them makes a joke about finding you just in time for brunch. You manage a weak smile. Brunch. The concept feels alien. After months of meltwater and nutrient paste, the idea of actual food is overwhelming. You step into the warm, noisy interior of the helicopter, the door slides shut, and you lift off, leaving the silent, white world behind. Looking down at the mountain receding below, you think about the journey, the avalanche, the digging, the boredom, the endless night, the hopeful whispers of spring, and finally the sound of a voice. It was a long, hard wait, but you made it. You're safe. You can finally relax.